Welcome to 10 minutes of international current events. I'm Carl Azus for CNN Student News. We're starting today's show in Northern Europe. The northeastern part of Norway borders the nation of Russia. The line's about 118 miles long, and it's near there that about 300 U.S. Marines are participating in military training exercises with Norwegian troops. Why? The U.S. and Norway are members of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was formed in 1949 by European countries and the U.S. as a sort of guard against the Soviet Union and the armies it positioned after World War II in Eastern and Central Europe. The NATO treaty says that an attack against one NATO country is an attack against all of them, and that other member countries would come to help. So with tensions today increasing between Russia and several Western nations, including the U.S., military training and maneuvers on both sides is on the rise.
War just got very cold again for these US Marines, training with tanks in Norway, on the eastern borders of a NATO that's suddenly nervous once more.
They're moving forwards now towards the fake enemy positions, but these kind of exercises since Russia's moves in Ukraine have taken on a new kind of realism and urgency.
In January, 300 Marines will move to Norway permanently. That's how worried about Moscow's intentions they are. For now, a unit from North Carolina are readying these Abrams tanks, normally stored deep in caves, but now the furthest north of the Arctic Circle they've ever been.
Swap this team, radio!
After Iraq and Afghanistan, these are old, new war games about protecting Europe. And they know that when the enemy isn't role-playing, it'll probably be the newly emboldened Russian military.
In 2014, that was a clear sign that Russia has stepped into an area where they are willing and able to use military power. You know, suddenly we have changed focus from what was going on, in particular in Afghanistan, and to collective defense, national defense.
A change in focus somebody's watching. Norwegian police investigating 10 sightings of medium-sized unidentified drones over these exercises. At the furthest point north of the border you can go, it's an open game of watching. A Russian helicopter lands, rare here. It's not really a Russian invasion they worry about here, but rather the sort of separatist uprising Russia fomented in Ukraine. Little green men with guns creating trouble.
We're heading out with the Norwegian Border Patrol towards their frontier with Russia, a presence on the ground being vital for them in ensuring nothing untoward happens with their large, at times unfriendly neighbour.
That's really the reason for the Norwegian and American tanks you saw earlier. To be sure that even out here in the empty pines and crisp snow, no matter what a Trump presidency brings, there's enough muscle already here to enforce NATO's promises of collective security.
Have you seen Russians at all?
It happens. You just salute them.
Would you like to talk to them? If you could?
Probably, but it's illegal.
It is strange to hear Norwegians, NATO members, talk so vividly again about the Russian threat. The constant and real backdrop to this survival training happening tonight under a staggering display of the Northern Lights.
2 months ago, we reported on the controversial death of Keith Lamont Scott. He was a 43-year-old African-American man who was shot and killed by an African-American police officer in Charlotte, North Carolina. At that time, officers said Scott had a gun and refused to drop it after police told him to. Scott's family said he had no gun. Protests followed in Charlotte. Some were peaceful, others were destructive. Yesterday, the Mecklenburg County District Attorney, who's been investigating the case, said that the officer's use of deadly force was justified, that no charges would be filed against police, and that 15 prosecutors reached the decision unanimously. The district attorney also said that all the credible evidence leads to the conclusion that Scott was armed and that his DNA was found on a gun at the scene. A lawyer representing Keith Lamont Scott's family says they still have concerns and questions about the incident, like whether police could have done more to calm down the situation before the shooting. $108 billion. That's the amount of student loan debt that the U.S. federal government is set to pay for in the coming years. Why is that significant? Because it's a lot more money than the U.S. Education Department said it would be. For years, student loan debt, the money that U.S. students borrow to pay for college, has been soaring. To help borrowers avoid defaulting, to avoid missing their payments, the Obama administration strongly encouraged them to participate in a government program that limits what they actually have to pay back. And the administration says defaults have decreased as a result. But according to the Wall Street Journal, a new report from the Government Accountability Office says the Education Department badly underestimated what these debt-reducing plans would cost the federal government.
This isn't new. President Clinton first introduced income-based repayment. Eligible participants had to, one, have income that was low in relation to their debt, right? And then the second, taken out loans after 2007. Well, with the revised pay-as-you-earn, the Obama administration sort of widened the net and removed those restrictions for borrowers of federal direct loans. The administration really pushed the program aggressively to those borrowers. A borrower's monthly payment is capped at 10% of their income, and the remaining balance is forgiven after 10 years or 20 years, depending if you work in the public or private sector. It seems great, but who pays for this loan forgiveness? It's taxpayers.
Yesterday, Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives voted to keep their current minority leader. That's Nancy Pelosi from California. She's been the leader of House Democrats since 2003, and she overcame a challenge by Ohio Representative Tim Ryan. Republicans will control the House and the Senate in the new Congress, as they do now. But they won't have a Senate supermajority. That's 60 senators, enough to overcome a potential Democratic filibuster. So Republicans will need the support of some Democrats if others try to block legislation.
Senators could actually block legislation by mounting a filibuster.
So I'm going to remain on this floor until we get some signal, some sign.
I will speak until I can no longer speak.
In the olden days, in a different time, in a different era, it wasn't used all that often. If people were to mount a filibuster, they'd actually come to the floor of the Senate, they would launch these long speeches for hours and hours and hours to try to delay and frustrate the will of the Senate. More recently, in the last 15 or 20 years, simply the threat of a filibuster is enough to require 60 votes to overcome this delay tactic that's made it very difficult for parties in the majority to achieve their objective.
In the United States Senate, the minority is entitled to be heard. Not entitled to win, but entitled to be heard.
Fast forward to the Obama years, Republicans mounted filibuster after filibuster to stop President Obama's agenda.
I do so like green eggs and ham.
The reason why the Democrats were successful at the time is that they had a supermajority of 60 votes in order to overcome a filibuster. They didn't need any Republican votes. Today, much different. Republicans are not in a supermajority. They're going to have 52 seats in the new Congress. That means they'll need 8 Democratic senators to break any filibuster. It's a risk for Democrats to simply block everything that Donald Trump puts forward. 5 Democratic senators are up for re-election in 2018 in states that Donald Trump won by a significant margin. That means if they are viewed as too obstructionist, too partisan, that could actually hurt their chances of winning re-election. And Chuck Schumer, the incoming Senate Democratic leader, knows this. He's trying to balance the needs of these moderates to work with Donald Trump with also progressives in his caucus like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who want to fight the Trump administration tooth and nail. So Democrats are going to have to weigh how far they want to go to obstruct Donald Trump's agenda.
People who love skydiving say it's pure magic. For the 2016 Guinness World Records Day, a magician worked his magic during a 120-mile-per-hour free fall. He completed 11 tricks over the course of a 15,000-foot skydive to set the record. This same magician holds the title for most magic tricks performed in a wind tunnel in 3 minutes. That was 8. Maybe to him, all that was a breeze, but it was no gimmick. You gotta slide a hand into anyone abracadabra brave enough to presto limits, putting on an act where the danger is no illusion. Probably took a lot of practice. I'm Carl Azuz, and this is my Vanishing Act.